Coronavirus has disrupted industries and also devastated economies across the world, and South Africa is no different. Political parties have not been spared from the effects of the coronavirus, including the ANC, which has had to postpone some of its conferences at national, provincial, and regional level. But also the party has also experienced financial difficulties around this time. And today we are at Luthuli House for a sit-down with the Secretary-General of the ANC, Mr. Ace Magashule. SG, thank you very much for your time, and let us not waste it any further. SG, you are in charge of the ANC's administration during a time of a global pandemic. Can you tell us how the coronavirus has impacted the functioning of the ANC, but also how the ANC has responded to this challenge?
This pandemic is generally has affected the entire globe, and it has impacted on the lives of all of us in the world, especially here in South Africa. And organizationally, of course, economically, socially, in many respects. And organizationally, it has affected us because as the ANC, the mass-based organization, the organization which believes in interacting with people from time to time, engaging them on the ground, we can no longer do that because we have to ourselves. Because the ANC is in power, is in government, we have to observe all the regulations as South Africans because we are South Africans, be it as leaders or members of the African National Congress. And therefore, we can no more do things we used to do. We now have to revert to what is called the new normal and actually focus on the economy in another way as to how we must, and balance between the economy, balance about the livelihood and the lives of our people, and also balance in terms of making sure that we don't collapse as the economy, because I think globally countries are actually collapsing.
Now, how are you able to make sure that ANC structures remain in place and that they're functioning? I'm sure most of them are beyond their term now, but also, and more importantly, you've announced a few days ago that you are postponing the NGC and other regional and provincial conferences indefinitely. I mean, when you say indefinitely, it sounds like you have no plan. Is there a tentative date we're working around? But also, how are you keeping these structures going?
In this case, you can't say, let's have an NGC next week, because we are told by scientists that this is actually going to reach its peak. And therefore, you can't say we'll have a conference next week and then you postpone again, you continue postponing. We always take advice, we always research, we always look at what many others are doing. And we believe that our structures before COVID were already, some have started regional and branch meetings. Mpumalanga was supposed to have gone to a conference. They were ready for April. The regions in most parts of the country were ready. They have already started BGMs, by BGMs, where they were actually starting to appoint delegates to conferences. And then this corona came. And of course, the political life is continuing, but it's not the same as when there was no corona, because we can't physically meet. We can't let people meet the PEC, the NEC of more than 100 people meet. It's a gathering which is not allowed, and that's why we have to use technology.
I think it's clear, SG, from your response that by the time, if we ever get to that point where we're beyond or we can deal with COVID-19, that technology would be used or utilized at all levels of the structures of the ANC. And the ANC has been wary of technology. I remember, I think it was the 2007 conference where it was meant to be online voting, and that was defeated and on the plenary. So do you think that going forward that the ANC will actually adopt technology in how it, I've seen you've done it with membership, in how it conducts its elections internally?
Well, it depends on of course, that's the way we need to go. Before COVID, I couldn't operate and watch and be on social media. I couldn't actually use Zoom to interact. I couldn't use my phone. But I was forced by circumstances and conditions. When it goes and comes to conferences, it depends whether the atmosphere is not polarized, because any technology can easily be manipulated. And that's why human beings will always believe in themselves.
I'm sure someone can argue a branch can be manipulated as well.
It can be, but if it's physical counting, it is not easy, because you also have observers there who have to observe what is actually taking place when you do the counting physically. And as I say, it depends when the political atmosphere is polarized. You don't want to take chances. You want to make sure that we are not too many. You are not counting millions. If a conference is a conference of 3,000, why do you want to go technology if people are not approving it? So the conference will still express itself and actually say, no, manual counting.
And now, coming from the last NEC, the ANC is talking about synchronized elections at all levels. Now, someone might say that, is it because the ANC probably fears, because the electoral pie has been diminished over the years, that it might not be ready to go to an election next year? But secondly, if you are calling for a synchronized election, when do you envisage that election happening?
There has been a lot of arguments that you are able, with local government elections, you are able to even look at your strength, and you are able to be kept on your toes, because you know after another 2 years you'll have provincial and national elections. So you gear yourself all the time. You don't actually forget your constituency, the masses of our people. We don't use people as voting robots, because you know that immediately after these elections, there is going to be another election. So all the time, you then keep in touch and in contact with the people. But we have been debating this, and comrades have been convincing one another, each other, that it's saving the cost, it's saving the time, and we are creating a dialogue in society. And I'm sure other parties are also actually saying it makes sense.
Have you sourced their views, or maybe just a cursory glance at what others are saying or thinking?
Well, we always start first as the African National Congress. We hear EFF is saying let's go for a single election, also synchronized. We don't know what other parties are saying, but within the ANC, it has been a debate which has been ongoing.
You say conditions didn't allow at the time, and you've also said that people are saying it will save the country money. What is the main motivation for the ANC to be pushing for this?
The main motivation, remember also, even with, we want to have a seamless type of governance. The municipality, if it's 5 years, it must be 5 years province, national, at ground level. We have even argued, even for the Auditor General, when he audits a government, you don't audit the province and national, and you audit municipality, and we get the audit of the municipalities next financial year when we're supposed to get them now. It will actually assist us to understand and run government properly, efficiently, and actually try and understand how to assist the local sphere. The same with the ANC. If possible, we want to ensure that that gap of the president of the ANC, you elect the president, and in terms of our resolutions and constitution, we said the president of the ANC will become the president of the country. But as we go to the next conference, you still have that gap. You elect the president who's the current president, if he's not re-elected, and then we come again and say, but in terms of our resolution, we said the president of the ANC will be the president of the country. So immediately we elect a new president, we say, Mr. President, we think. So we are also looking at that. It depends on the branches.
So basically, the ANC is also looking to align its own elections with that.
Yes, we want to align the ANC elections with that, so that the 5 year is that similar as 5 years.
And avoid recalls.
Yes.
You speak about the local government, and you're mentioning the audit that the Auditor General, and in the last report of the Auditor General, which you touched on as the NEC of the ANC, to express your displeasure at the poor audit outcomes. But if you look at, someone might say that it's actually not enough for the ANC to do that, because if you look at the majority of the municipalities that are not getting good outcomes, it's actually ANC municipalities. And you've seen that in Gauteng, that Gauteng has got better results, which tells me, and which tells, I'm sure, everyone else, that something must be wrong with the way in which you deploy, in that you are responsible for the bad deployment.
People are saying we must rush, and they say people don't have capacity. I did not have capacity to, after 94. This was a new democratic government. I did not have so-called skills, but I became a member of the legislature. I became MEC. I've been MEC of many departments, 4, 5, 6 departments. I became Premier. I was a member of Parliament for 7 years in Cape Town. Where did I suddenly take this experience and capacity?
That someone might argue and say, but that was 1994, it made sense, and it's now 2020, some 26 years later, so surely the ANC must take some level of responsibility.
And let me tell you, a lot of black people who were not educated, who were denied education, are by far the most educated today. By far the most capacitated, because it is racism to believe that if you are white, you are competent, you have capacity, you have skills. When you put a standard 5 or a metric person to run an SOE or to run something, you take a black with the same metric or with no metric, and when it's black, you say there's no capacity, there is incompetency. You can't compare the capacity of Johannesburg Metro with the capacity of a municipality in Frankfurt, Mafube municipality, or in any part of Harib or Eastern Cape or Limpopo or Mpumalanga. You have the base here. You had during apartheid, you had a concentration of skilled people here.
So someone may interpret that as though you're coming across as though you're justifying the poor audit outcomes.
No. I'm not justifying any poor audit outcome. I'm just actually saying you inherited this, and the mess which has been there, you are not going to deal with that mess in the next 40 years. It's a serious mess. At least I've experienced. And I can tell you that...
So it's not bad deployment?
No, it's not bad deployment. It's not bad deployment. It has never been. These municipalities, small municipalities, can't recruit people like you with proper skills, because we can't pay you the money we pay to a municipal manager of Tshwane, of Cape Town, of Mangaung. And stop criticizing municipalities and councillors. They are public representatives, like MECs, like MPs. It doesn't mean when I'm a councillor, I am not as competent and I don't have the political
acumen. But the criticism has to do with how they do their jobs or how they do not do their jobs. Though.
But why do you generalize when others are actually performing and others are not actually performing because maybe they don't have capacity? The unfortunate part, for more than 50 years, 100 years, 300 years, there was no apartheid municipality which opened up their books. They were never audited. It's us, the ANC, who came and said, we have to account, we have to take responsibility and accountability in terms of the resources of our people, of the taxpayer.
You cannot compare a democratic state to the apartheid state. It's not a fair comparison. We should not even be going there, though.
Yeah, no, you can't, but you can't stop talking about what was happening during those days. In my own town, the guy who was the administrator of my town, that was Paris, was a guy, an old man with standard 2. You're not just going to reach that prosperous South Africa when you think that people say the economy is still in the whites hands, few white hands, and male. But they don't want to call it white monopoly capital. It is. It is. The economy is in the hands of whites. What do you call it? White monopoly capital.
And what represents it?
White. The economy is still in the hands of whites. You go to JSC, who is there? You go into our township, who is there? It's unlike even in the past. People are happy, new malls are coming into our township. Who are the owners of those malls? Who are the developers of those malls? The small shops in our towns are closed. Where should a black man go? He can't own property. He can't own land. He can't do this and that because if he ascends, it's called corruption. No, it can't be true.
But what is the role of the ANC in changing exactly that?
The ANC must still remain the voice of the voiceless, the voice of the poor. The ANC must still remain a radical militant organization of Mandela and Tambo. The ANC must never, because of the bread on the table, must never change its character. It depends on the ANC leaders. And the leaders come and go. And if you come and you don't have the basic consciousness, the fury of our revolution and struggle, you are new, you are educated, we come, we are appointed and we elect you because you can talk nice English. We want people who are educated, of course. But I always define education. Education is not certification. You can have a doctorate, you can have masters, you may not be educated. You have in the ANC organic intellectuals. You had Moses Kotane, Standard 3, who could actually argue and engage Walter Sisulu, Standard 3, Zuma, Standard 3. But these leaders were denied education. It's not because that they did not want to go to school. Conditions for a black person during those years, they couldn't actually do anything. So organic intellectuals are brewed, are groomed, they are boiled, and they emerge out of struggle. Zuma can engage any internationalist, anybody who's educated.
But I don't think that people, though, who criticize leaders, it's necessarily because of the level of their education, particularly in the case of someone like the former President Zuma. I mean, everyone accepts that he's an intelligent guy.
But is it so? Because people were telling us, no, this chap is not educated, we want educated people.
I think everyone understands Jacob Zuma.
I'm sure they understand
to be a smart politician, but I think the criticism of Jacob Zuma has little to do with his level of education, but rather with how he ran the state, as we now see now with the Commission of Inquiry.
Many good leaders in Africa and in the world who have the interest of our people at heart have been removed through allegations of corruption. Cuba will teach you better how during their struggle, even against imperialism in America, for the last 60 years or so, how people have tried, where our best leaders today, even in Africa, how you are actually removed, how the ANC must be weakened and remove the ANC and that cream of the ANC which understand and which participated in the liberation movement, which cannot easily be bought. You have to annihilate them and destroy them and come with this, because until today, you have no proof of some of the allegations. Because
Isn't that
you guys make allegation, you make allegation facts. And it pains me when you talk about allegation, it is alleged, it is alleged. And people write books, and they write books, and they write books, and they write books, and they repeat stories, they repeat stories. They establish the media, which is pro the establishment, because we must never change the status quo of South Africa. No, it is time for revolutionaries, it's time for ordinary people to see the bigger picture and say, let's stand up and defend the gains of our revolution.
You cannot equate former President Zuma to the cream of what the ANC could produce. I mean, just last week we was sitting with the State Capture Commission, which is looking into rampant corruption during his term of office.
No, it was not during Zuma's term of office. When, as the ANC, we take collective responsibility. Zuma was there with ministers. Were these ministers robots? Things go through cabinet. Things go through the executive council. You tell me that Zuma had ministers who were afraid of Zuma? These are not the leadership of the ANC, I know. I know the leadership of the ANC. I know those ministers. They were people who could engage. Are you saying Zuma is corrupt? No, Chief.
Are you saying he's not?
No, I'm saying when you talk government, you blame Zuma for a department when Zuma is not running a department. An accounting officer is somebody else. The minister is somebody else.
But you cannot deny that political power and influence plays a role, particularly in government.
You want Zuma to know and run the Department of Defense. You want him to run the departments of, and you're going to say Zuma is not giving his ministers an opportunity to run their department. Ministers are not giving their DGs to run their department. HODs, premiers and MECs are not. No.
The question then is that with the evidence that was led during the commission by former PRASA chairperson Bobo Mlefi, saying that the ANC actually turned a blind eye to some of the issues that he was bringing to the table. And evidence that it also leads, it talks about how the chairperson of Sufambo Rail said that the money that came from PRASA went to the ANC. How does that make you feel?
But you listen to a story, there is always there is also the other story. Before you even judge, listen to both. Treat an ANC member, when you allege, treat an ANC member like you, an ordinary South African, that the law has no eyes. There is no animal farm here. We are all equal before the law. Treat that person to say you are innocent until proven otherwise. It's a universal global position. Why do you want to? I know your argument is going to say, but ANC in terms of its standing is not EFF, it's not DA, it's not this.
Which is it is not.
Yeah, it is not. But members of society, leaders of the ANC are South Africans. So they must be accorded the rights which are enshrined in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution of South Africa. The Constitution of the ANC is, by the way, there to regulate how we work, how we operate. It is not above the Constitution of the country. I wouldn't compare the ANC in terms of our standing, because Breitenbach was in Parliament. He was charged. Whilst her case was continuing, until the court found her not guilty, she was still a member of Parliament of the DA. But it will be the DA which makes the first noise, step aside, step aside, step aside.
The Integrity Committee give them teeth. And even at that time, the Integrity Committee could still make recommendations, even though people were accused. But people would not step aside. But the conference said, even though people may still be going to court, but the fact that they're associated with these serious charges to actually save the integrity of the ANC.
That's how the enemy is planning to finish the ANC. Some of us will never accept such a simple understanding, because I'm saying to you, a member of the ANC is entitled to be treated like a citizen. Fairness, the rule of law, the law of natural justice is what you and I expect. You just come tomorrow and say, Magashule was involved in this and therefore I must step aside. I will never do that. I will never.
Then why do you have an integrity committee?
I must be treated like all South Africans. And that's why we must guard against the resolutions of our conferences. Because as far as I remember, the conference resolution we took was that until you are found guilty by a competent court of law, the universal principle, you are innocent until proven guilty. And out of your own consciousness, you can actually step aside.
So which means any member of the ANC anywhere in the country where an integrity committee, be it at a regional or provincial level, that has asked people to step aside, they have no reason to do that if they do not feel out of their own volition that they want to do that.
You say to people, step aside, then they step aside for 5 years, and you say there is justice. No, please.
Now, SG, you've made this point actually when we're talking about the issue of Florence Radzelani and Msiza in Limpopo. Now, the ANC makes a decision to reinstate these two leaders of Limpopo. Just a week after the NPA starts moving against people who are implicated in the Mutau report, people who are implicated in that. This decision is taken merely a week after that. How does did the ANC not consider this in taking the decision to reinstate them?
Why do you undermine and doubt the intelligence of a collective wisdom of the ANC leadership, which has various views, but this leadership in its own wisdom come together and debate this matter and take a decision? Why do you doubt that they have taken
actually, it's the
a wrong
that
decision? That is the wisdom.
Sure.
In its wisdom, the entire collective of the African National Congress, do you think these people just wake up one day and we didn't know that we will actually intensively discuss this matter and arrive at the decision we have taken? We have taken a right decision. And we are not undermining anybody. We are the first to understand and know that our constituency. But why do you want to hang people for things you don't know?
This is not just my own thinking. It's not something I'm dreaming up. It's your own integrity committee.
No.
That takes a decision in its own wisdom.
Based on these lies flouted by the media, consciously and deliberately, to flush the ANC out of power. I'm not Ace Magashule, the individual. I'm the messenger of the African National Congress. I communicate the best, wisest decisions taken by the National Executive Committee of men and women who understand wrong and right.
Now, you say that the ANC, and in fact that's how the ANC describes itself, that it's pro-poor. And I would argue at this point that the people who lost money in VBS are thousands of poor people on the one side, right? And then you've got two ANC leaders who are implicated in that very same corruption. Who do you stand for then? If you actually...
I stand for the poor, I stand for justice, I stand for everybody who we treat equally.
The ANC secretary in Limpopo.
Are these people corrupt?
You tell me.
You are saying alleged.
Are you saying they are not?
Because you are very careful to say they are corrupt. So you're going to pounce and say alleged corruption, so that I don't take you to any court of law. That's what journalists do.
Do you think they are unfairly targeted?
I'm saying the National Executive Committee in wisdom took a decision. Do you want to tell me that all these 100+ members of the National Executive Committee of the ANC are stupid?
If then you're not concerned if you think that the decision was wise, why then did you see fit to want to go and explain it to the people, the communities of Limpopo?
That's how the African National Congress work. We are a liberation movement. At the center of this movement are the masses of our people, the people themselves. And whatever we do, and that's why we said this decision will be preceded. And people who have gone to school will understand that when we say preceded, it means we are first going to engage and consult our structures and whoever. And once we are done with that process, we'll then say to Florence and Denny.
So they're not back in office yet?
No, they are not yet back in office.
Now, if the structures, because it looks like to me that it's just compliance or being seen as consulting, because the NEC has taken a decision. Would it not have made sense, though, to have first consulted the very structures before you take that decision? Put differently, what does it change?
But you guys are surprising at times, because how many decisions throughout its history the ANC has actually taken? The ANC represents the masses of our people, and whatever decisions we take, when we decide to go out there to the masses of our people, we do so with a clear mind that we have taken a decision.
So it's not consultation.
And we want them to understand our decision. And we also want to understand them where we come from. And we want to say, with the power of persuasion, you make people understand. And if there is logic in whatever we do, and if there is no logic, we will listen. We are a listening organization. We are a listening party.
So if those structures tell you that we do not like this decision, as did the secretary of the ANC in Limpopo,
in the science of politics, you don't talk about what you think. We have taken a decision.
So it won't change.
And we move on. We're going to engage. Conditions will determine. But you don't change your decision immediately. Is your decision going to change? Yes. No, it will change. We don't know. We don't operate that way.
So I can safely say it can still be influenced either way.
Let's leave the ANC internal processes to take its own course.
Now,
and we have already engaged the provincial executive of Limpopo yesterday, and the provincial executive committee of Limpopo in its entirety understand the logic and the decisions of the ANC.
So they accept the decision.
Quite disciplined, they accepted the decision because of its logic.
I'm sure you've seen comments that have been attributed to the secretary of the ANC in Limpopo, where he actually wanted to distance himself from that decision. How as the ANC, did you deal with that? Did you get an understanding? What informs that? Is he now accepting of that very decision?
I don't take hearsays. I don't take allegations. We engaged the leadership of Limpopo yesterday. And the Secretary of Limpopo is a very disciplined member of the ANC. And the Secretary of Limpopo has embraced our decision because he's part of the National Executive Committee, he's part of the PEC. Before we take any decision, I have my views. So-and-so has their own views. So-and-so has his own views. We discuss, we engage, we disagree, and ultimately we are persuaded.
What do you say to the thousands of people of Limpopo who lost money in the collapse of VBS?
Well, we have said to the law enforcement, deal with the perpetrators. Deal with the people who stole the money of the people of Limpopo. It is still our position. We are saying to the law enforcers, enforcement agencies, charge people. If you find them guilty, they are guilty. We are not saying don't charge people. What is wrong with our position we have taken? Because we are not saying, don't charge anybody. But this must never be influenced by certain people, political heavyweights, political heads, the media and all that. Because the media wants us to finish certain leaders of the ANC. Who can't see this agenda, which has been driven to finish the African National Congress? It will just be a person who is not, who is very myopic, who doesn't understand politics, who doesn't understand the counter-revolution, who doesn't analyze, who doesn't see that the alternative voice is not wanted in this space. Finish this movement of the people of South Africa.
And SG, it may well be that some people, as you're saying, may be myopic. And the interpretation of that decision is then perceived to be that the ANC is siding with people who are implicated in corruption against the very poor it claims to represent. My question then is, what do you say to those thousands of people who lost money in VBS, who slept outside, hoping to withdraw some of their savings?
We are with those people. That's why we are saying the law enforcement agencies must charge those people, and the courts of law must decide. Because at times, innocent people are implicated because of the media hype. If you want to destroy me, you can destroy me, but don't destroy me with lies. And the truth, fortunately, that's what we have fought for. Those who fought against apartheid, we always said the truth shall prevail. And justice must be done. And it must be seen happening.
If someone says to you that the ANC is actually tolerant of corruption in terms of how it deals with the very people that are implicated, be it at local government level, because some of the people who are accused actually here had to do with monies that were invested in VBS. But how would you be able to convince them that that is not the case?
People know that the ANC will never hide any corruption. The ANC is a party which you can't pass any legislation without the ANC in parliament. The laws in parliament are initiated by the African National Congress, whereas the law against corruption, and it's us. How will we actually come with such laws? And we don't want these laws to be implemented. Simple logic.
Now,
why do you want us to pursue and prosecute and people because you think they must go down? You think they must go down. You think, and in politics, when you repeat lies, you repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. People believe you. And that's why you shut the doors for an alternative voice.
The ANC issues a statement and says it will delay payments of salaries. And you attribute that to the effects of the coronavirus. Does the ANC have a plan to put its books back in the black?
Well, our employees have been paid.
No, sure. The fact that you are not able to pay them tells that there was a problem, and there might be a problem fundamentally. So what I'm asking is that, does the ANC have any plans in terms of how it fundraises in the future? Because history has proven that the manner in which you've been able to have fundraisers actually mired the ANC.
We have always had plans. We do have plans, and there is party funding. We are arguing that for democracy to flourish, and I think it's all political parties in parliament. Parliament must actually ensure that political parties in South Africa, if we want our democracy to mature, must be funded, so that you don't blame us for getting money from people we don't know, who might actually be involved in corruption, and we don't know that they are involved in corruption. They either we see them as genuine business people, and they donate to your party, and you think these are very good people and they've donated to your party.
The ANC supported the supplementary budget that was presented in Parliament. And there's a group of economists, about 100 of them, who write to Parliament to say that MPs must reject this budget because it will do nothing to lift the economy. If anything, it reduces it undermines even the 500 billion that was pledged by the government. Now, the ANC has said this. It has said that it wants the economy to grow and it wants government to invest in infrastructure, in agriculture, and yet in the very same budget, you see that, for instance, with agriculture, there's a reduction of about 2.4 billion. How do you respond to that?
If people want to be in power, they must stand for elections and they must be elected. In power is the African National Congress, and in power, the ANC must exercise its power with humility. And that's what the ANC is all about. It's about simple leadership, humble leadership. Why should we listen to people who are not running the country? These people who are ministers, who are in government, they have been elected. The majority of the South African population who have a right to vote have voted for this party. And in this party, when they were voting, they had a list of people who will actually go to parliament on behalf of the African National Congress. So they voted. So what makes you think that these ones are the ones we must listen to? We must listen to those who have been elected. I understand as a leader I'm going to be attacked so many times because no one will like us. No one will like the ANC to stay in power, especially those we have taken power from. There's no way they will like it. When we try to equalize things, when we try and say, hey, the economy must also be in our hands, it's going to be a big fight. When we say bring back our land, it's going to be a big fight. You think you'll... But you know that this land was not yours. It was my land and my ancestors' land. And when we say, bring back what belongs to me, and for that matter, we say, let's work together when we accommodate you, and you think we are stupid because we're not taking what belongs to us forcefully, because we want to build and reconstruct this country. We want to live side by side. We want to be in peace and harmony. Don't take us for granted, because for as long as there is such inequalities, the most unequal society in the world is South Africa. It can't be right. So let those understand that there will never be peace in South Africa for as long as the majority of South Africans, black as they are, remain poor. There will never be peace.
Let's talk about the government's response to the coronavirus. You've seen in the various provinces, in fact, even the health minister, saying that the system is under pressure at a faster rate than would have been anticipated. And earlier on, we saw Cuban doctors coming in to augment those numbers. Let's talk about your perceptions of the government's response and some of the interventions government has made, the ANC government has made to actually respond to the coronavirus.
I think government has behaved, of South Africa, has handled the situation up to so far the right way. And that's why the Cubans are all over the world. And Italy is calling upon the United Nations, is calling upon the world to award Cuba and give it a Nobel Peace Prize. The best internationalist in the world, the Cuban people. And they are here out of love, out of solidarity, out of love for human being, humankind, humanity. And that's why we must also test whether they have vaccines. We shouldn't go to the West only and think that the West is our hope. Those who were with us during the dark days of apartheid, who were fighting side by side with us, should be our friends. President Mandela said, you must never choose who our friends should be. When he was with Arafat, when he was with Fidel Castro, and people were saying, and that's why Mandela made sure even the first embassy after freedom, embassy of Cuba.
But do they have vaccines though?
Of course, they do have their own medicines. They have their own vaccines. They have. When we do trials, we must also do trials with the Cuban medicines because they believe in primary health care. In Cuba, when you have diabetes, they don't amputate you. They fix you. Why can't we use such medicine of the Cuban people?
The government's response has been criticized, as you have said, as it happens when you are in power. But there is the issue of alcohol, which in fact, all the provinces have raised. Just yesterday, we had the Premier of Gauteng and his executive talking about the pressure on the trauma units. We've had the Eastern Cape raise the same issue, going as far as saying, please, we are in trouble. Now, these are hotspots. Surely, if the ANC is a listening government, these are your structures, these are your governments, these are your people in government. Why are you not listening to them?
No, you are rushing, because behind closed doors there is a command center. The command center, they are also experts. They know all these things. They see all these things: crime, gender-based violence. A lot of people, the hospitals are becoming full, casualties, and when there is no liquor, these things are not there. And that's why we must change the mentality of South Africans. We must educate them properly, that you can live without alcohol. Alcohol is not, because in the world we are one of the biggest consumers of alcohol. But our government will listen. Don't want to say they must decide today. They are still doing their things. The way government has responded, president and the team, I think they have done this country wonders. They have done this country what is supposed to happen. That is responsible leadership. Leadership does not actually depend on noises. Sober, listening, caring leadership. It cares about the economy collapsing. It cares about the lives of our people. It cares about livelihood. It balances things. It cares that things might actually even be like this forever. We don't know. So if we lock down, you are going to blame them again.
But what do you think is the ANC, though? I mean, we're saying we're reaching a peak much faster than had been initially anticipated. And the government...
But it has
ANC
been anticipated, because we said once winter comes,
sure,
we are going to be in trouble.
But I think the point is that it's happening at a much faster rate than the ANC would have anticipated. And then there are these calls.
These calls will be taken into consideration. These calls, I can make a lot of noise and think that my voice is not heard. No. Let's give leadership, which is responsible, time and space, because they are leading this country excellently.
And they're considering some of these calls.
Of course, I think the ANC government is always considerate.
Let's talk, as we wrap up, SG, the response. There's been criticism of some of the deployees of the ANC in terms of how they have behaved around the COVID-19. I can give you names, but generally, from your assessment, and just a frank assessment, as the ANC, where have the fault lines been, and where have ministers, where have their stars shined? Where have they...
I am very frank. I think our deployees, first and foremost, are responsible leadership. The style of leadership varies from one leader to the other or to the next. And same content. Some, when they punch the message, you can feel that it's like war. Some, when they punch the same message, they are soft. Some are irritated by people who don't want to abide and adhere to the regulations. It's sometimes irritating, but they are trying to push a point. So in whatever way we see, generally I can say our comrades have done well.
And
let's go with
President Ramaphosa?
President Ramaphosa has done very well, together with his team, because President Ramaphosa is not working as an individual. He's part of the collective. The command center sits, they discuss. President Ramaphosa comes to us, we share ideas. He goes to ministers, he checks with ministers, he checks with scientists, and we say, President, take whatever decision which makes sense. And the President does what majority of South Africans have come to appreciate. If President Ramaphosa did not actually lock down well in time, we are going to be in crisis.
Lastly, with such a glowing assessment of President Ramaphosa, you came into power on a different slate, if he has done as well as you say he has, would you support him for another term as president?
In the ANC, we don't talk about, and I come from that school and from that culture and tradition, where I don't talk about leadership when there is leadership. When it's time for us to discuss conference, come the next conference, I belong to a branch. I'm not Ace Magashule, the individual, Ace Magashule, an important person. I belong to the basic unit of the ANC called a branch. My branch actually discusses, and my branch at a particular given time, when the National Executive Committee says you can now discuss leadership, my branch discusses. It is then influenced by other branches in the province, in the region, in the country. That's when we engage. And that's how the leadership of the ANC throughout history. When Bo Mandela removed other leaders, presidents of the ANC, that's how ANC is. This is the ANC we know.
But then
it doesn't mean, after Nasrec, with how I grew up in the ANC, my understanding of the ANC, how I've been cultured, how I've been grilled and baptized in the ANC, I understand it fairly well. The branches have spoken. And after each and every conference of the ANC, we have always embraced the elected leadership. So I do support President Ramaphosa. And maybe before Nasrec and immediately after Nasrec, there were these tussles. We are working excellently. As the top six, we are working excellently. As the National Executive Committee, you don't see this faction there, faction here. We take decisions collectively. This is the ANC I've known for so many years. And I wish and hope that the ANC keep this spirit.
Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for sitting down with us and to share your views and your thoughts with our viewers. There you have it, South Africa. That was the Secretary-General of the ANC.